Good evening, my friends, and welcome to the Dead Vaults, Redrum, and then some segments. Once again, I am your cult host this evening, the Keymaster Slasher Poe, and today, my friends, we exhume one of the most evilest known serial killers in history. I can only be talking about one sinister individual. Indeed, my friends, tonight we exhume the case of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer, rapist, and burglar from February 29, 1960 to June 7, 2013. His highly publicized home invasion crime sprees terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area and later the residents of the San Francisco area from June 1984 to August 1985. Prior to his capture, Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by the news media. He used a wide variety of weapons, including handguns, knives, machetes, tire irons, and hammers. Ramirez, who was an unavowed sadist, never expressed any remorse for his crimes. The judge who upheld Ramirez's 13 death sentences remarked that his deeds exhibited cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma while awaiting execution on California's death row. Indeed, Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas on February 29, 1960, the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez, 5 children. His father, a Mexican national and former Juarez policeman who later became a laborer on the Santa Fe Railroad, was prone to fits of anger that often resulted in physical abuse. As a 12-year-old Richie, as he was known to his family, was strongly influenced by his older cousin Miguel. Mike Ramirez, a decorated U.S. Army Green Beret combat veteran who often boasted of his gruesome exploits during the Vietnam War. He shared Polaroid photos of his victims, including Vietnamese women he had raped. In some of the photos, Mike posed with the severed heads of a woman he had abused. Ramirez, who had begun smoking marijuana at the age of 10, bonded with Mike over joints and gory war stories. Mike taught his young cousin some of his military skills, such as killing with stealthy and certainty. Around this time, Ramirez began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. Ramirez was present on May 4, 1973, when his cousin Mike fatally shot his wife Jessie in the face with a .38 caliber revolver during a domestic argument. After the shooting, Ramirez became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. Later that year, he moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, an obsessive peeping Tom, who took Richie along some of his nocturnal exploits. Ramirez also began using LSD and cultivated an interest in Satanism. Mike was found not guilty of Jesse's murder by reason of insanity, and was later released in 1977. After 4 years of incarceration at the Texas State Mental Hospital, his influence over Ramirez continued. The adolescent Ramirez began to meld his beginning sensations of sexual fantasies with violence, including forced bondage and rape. While still in school, he took a job at a local Holiday Inn, where he used his passkey to rob sleeping patrons. His unemployment ended abruptly after a hotel guest returned to his room to find Ramirez attempting to rape his wife. Though the husband beat Ramirez senseless at the scene, criminal charges were dropped when the couple, who lived out of state, declined to return to testify against him. Ramirez, out of Jefferson High School in the 9th grade, at the age of 22, he moved to California, where he settled permanently. On April 10, 1984, Ramirez murdered 9-year-old Mei Lung in a hotel basement, where he was living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. He raped and beat the girl before stabbing her to death and hanged her body from a pipe. This Ramirez's first known killing was not intentionally identified as being connected to the subsequent crime spree. In 2009, Ramirez's DNA was matched to a sample obtained at this crime scene. In 2016, officials disclosed evidence of a second suspect, identified through a DNA sample retrieved from the scene, who is believed to have been present at Lung's murder. Authorities have not publicly identified the suspect, described as being a juvenile at the time, and have not brought charges due to the lack of evidence. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glass Hill Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly while asleep in her bed, and her throat slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Ramirez's fingerprints was found on a mesh screen he recovered to gain access to an open window. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself. Inside the house was her roommate, Dale Okazaki, 34, who heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head, he shot her once in the forehead, killing her. Within an hour of the Rosemead home invasion, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tarsili Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, shooting her twice in the face with a .22 caliber handgun, and fled. She was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The two murderers and third attempt in a single day attracted extensive coverage from news media, who dubbed the curly haired attacker with bulging eyes and wide-spaced rotting teeth the walk-in killer and the Valley Intruder. On March 27, 1985, Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier in Whittier at approximately 2 a.m. and killed the sleeping Vincent Zazzara, age 64, with a gunshot to his head from the .22 caliber handgun. Zazzar's wife, Maxine, age 44, was awakened by the gunshot, and Ramirez beat her and then bound her hands while demanding to know where her valuables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under her bed, which was not loaded. That infuriated Ramirez. He shot her 3 times with the .22, then fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. He mutilated her body by stabbing her several times, then gouged out her eyes and placed them in a jewelry box, which he left with. The autopsy determined that the mutilations were post-mortem. Ramirez left footprints from a pair of Abby sneakers in the flower bed, which the police photographed and cast. This was virtually the only evidence that the police had at the time. Bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, and the police realized a serial killer was at large. Vincent and Maxine's bodies were discovered by their son Peter. On May 14, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of Bill Doy, 66, and his disabled wife Lillian, 56. Surprising Doy in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Doy went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man into unconsciousness, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, then raped her after he ransacked the home for valuables. Bill Doy died of his injuries while in the hospital. On the night of May 29, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen Mercedes-Benz to Monterey and stopped at the house of Mabel May Bell, 83, and her sister Florence Nettie Lang, 81. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he bludgeoned and bound the invalid Lang in her bedroom, then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electrical cord to shock the woman. After raping Lang, he used Bell's lipstick to draw a bafflement on her thighs as well as on the walls of both bedrooms. Discovered 2 days later, both women were found alive but comatose. Bell later died of her injuries. The next day, Ramirez drove the same car to Burbank and snuck into the home of Carol Kyle, 42. At gunpoint, he bound Kyle and her 11-year-old son with handcuffs and ransacked the house. He released Kyle to direct him to where the family's valuables were. He then sodomized her repeatedly. Ramirez also repeatedly ordered her to not look at him, telling her at one point that he would cut her eyes out. He fled the scene after retrieving the child from the closet and binding the two together again with the handcuffs. On the night of July 2nd, 1985, he drove a stolen Toyota to Arcadia, randomly selecting the house of Mary Cannon, 75. After quietly entering the widowed grandmother's home, he found her asleep in her bedroom. He bludgeoned her into unconsciousness with a lamp and then repeatedly stabbed her using a 10-inch butcher's knife from her kitchen. She was found dead at the crime scene. On July 5th, 1985, Ramirez broke into a home in Sierra Madre and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept in her bedroom. After searching in vain for a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. He was startled to see sparks emanate from the cord, and when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house, believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved the girl. Bennett survived the savage beating, which required 478 stitches to close the lacerations to her scalp. On July 7th, 1985, Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Nelson, 61, in Monterey Park. Finding her asleep on her living room couch, he beat her to death using his fist and kicking her in the head. A shoe print from an Ivy sneaker was left imprinted on her face. After cruising to other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, 63. Ramirez assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, and stole her jewelry. When she swore to him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan. On July 1985, the 20th, Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota to Glendale. He chose the home of Lela Gninding, 66, and her husband Maxon, 68. He burst into the sleeping couple's bedroom and hacked them with a machete, then killed them with shots to the head from a .22 caliber handgun. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of valuables. After quickly fencing the stolen items from the Gninding residence, Ramirez drove to Sun Valley. At approximately 4:15 a.m., he broke into the home of Knavnith family. He shot the sleeping Changanom Knavnith in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him instantly. Then repeatedly raped Sockid Covenant, beating and sodomizing her. He bound the couple's terrifying 8-year-old son before dragging some kick around the house to reveal the location of any valuable items. During his assault, he demanded that she swear to Satan that she was not hiding any money from him. On August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. He crept into the bedroom, startling Virginia, prompting him to shoot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris in the temple and attempted to flee. Chris fought back while avoiding being hit by 2 more shots during the struggle before Ramirez managed to escape. The couple survived their injuries. On August 30th, 1985, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he had become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television news program across California. After failing to meet his brother, He returned to Los Angeles early on the morning of August 31st. He walked past police officers who were stalking out the bus terminals in hopes of catching the killer should he attempt to flee on an outbound bus. To a convenience store in East Los Angeles, after noticing a group of elderly Mexican women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, or the killer, Ramirez saw his face on the front pages of the newspaper rack and fled the store in a panic. After running across the Santa Ana freeway, he attempted to carjack a woman, but was chased away by bystanders, who pursued him. After hopping over several fences and attempting to carjack more individuals, one of whom had struck him over the head with a metal bar in the pursuit, the group held Ramirez down, relentlessly beating him until the police arrived and took him into custody. If you would like to exhume this case further, make sure to Google the crimes of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. Well, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this Redrum and then some. I am your cult host, the Keymaster Slasher Poe, and until next time, all of my true crime fans, make sure to join me throughout the week exclusively here on ButcherMedia.com's Deadvolt. I will be exhuming true crime facts all through the month, So join me, my friends, and make sure to follow me on Facebook at the Deadvolt Horror Show. From the depths below, into the blood we go.